Good morning, DFLers. It is Tuesday, April 28th. Welcome to the DFL Daily. That song was incredible. I almost did not want to start this call. I wanted to just keep listening to it. We've got folks on today's call all the way from International Falls down to Rochester and all of southern Minnesota. I'm so glad to be with you here today. I am Jim Hyington, the executive director of the Minnesota Democratic Farmer Labor Party. Before we get into today's call, we have some upcoming events. Chatfield is having their Rural Rally for Democracy tomorrow at 5 p.m. Fun fact, Chatfield is where my family's from. Shout out to Western Days. In Mora, Minnesota, you can attend a Meet the Candidates event with DFLers from Senate District 11. You can meet the candidate for Senate, Mary Carlson, and Jack LaRue, candidate for House District 11B. That is Thursday at 3 p.m. Apple Valley is having a Rally for Our Rights also on Thursday at 4:30 p.m. In Minneapolis, Senate District 35 is having their coffee and conversation on Saturday at 9 a.m. For more information and future events, check out dfl.org/events. All right, let's get into it this week. You may have seen the sad, tragic news of what happened this week in Washington. Another act of political violence at the White House Correspondents' Dinner. The room was shaken after what happened there. The people who experienced that tragedy are going to be carrying the fear of that night with them for a very long time. And immediately, President Trump called for more security measures and used the moment to advertise the construction of his new ballroom with bulletproof windows. But here's what I keep coming back to when I think about this. Imagine being the parent of a 6-year-old. I'm the parent of a 2-year-old. Imagine it is their very first day of school. Their backpack is new. They are nervous, but they are excited to see their friends at school again. You drop your child off, you go to work, and then you hear the news. Someone brought a gun to school. That's what happened in Minneapolis last August 27th at Annunciation School. 6-year-olds. Their first day of kindergarten. And 2 children were killed that day. That was 8 months ago, yesterday. And their families are still waiting for action. Not for bulletproof windows, but for no bullets. For something to be done about the guns that are the leading cause of death for children under the age of 12. And the families of Annunciation did not go quiet after that day. They showed up, they organized, and they demanded more from their elected officials. Elected officials have a duty to protect us from guns. Those aren't my words. Those are the words of Lydia Kaiser, an 8th grader who was shot in the head at Annunciation School. The story of gun violence in America is a sad story. But in sad stories, there are heroes. People like Lydia Kaiser, not people building golden ballrooms. Minnesota's students and families are demanding change, and they deserve elected officials who will deliver it for them. But when we bring up common sense gun violence prevention, things like universal background checks, limits on high capacity magazines, keeping weapons of war off our streets, Republicans don't want to talk about these real practical solutions. They say that banning assault rifles isn't a solution when they voted against DFL Rep. Emma Greenman's bill to do just that. They say limits on high capacity magazines aren't a solution when they voted against Brad Tapke's bill to do just that. But here today, you're not going to take it from me. To talk about gun violence prevention from a physician's perspective, we are inviting to the DFL Daily Dr. Erin Stevens. Dr. Stevens is a Minnesota mom, an author, and an advocate. Dr. Stevens, thank you so much for joining us today. Welcome to the call.
Absolutely. I was also into the song, but you had a lot more important things to say than that song. So thanks for having me.
We're so glad that you're spending time with us this morning. Thanks again. Dr.
Yeah.
Stevens, you've spent your career as an OBGYN advocating for the health and safety of families, particularly women and children. So my first question for you is, when you heard about the shooting at Annunciation on the first day of school last August, what went through your mind as a physician, as a Minnesota mom? What were you thinking?
Yeah, I think, like any parent, I think all of us have that very visceral reaction right away, just heartbreaking, gut-wrenching, thinking about our own children. I have a 5-year-old and a 3-year-old, and, seeing those pictures of mothers taking their shoes off and running towards their kids, just trying to figure out, are they okay? I was at work that day, and I knew my kids were not at that school and they were safe, but all I could think about was getting home to my children and hugging them tight. Just unimaginable to think about that circumstance happening. And then as a physician, I imagine everyone working in the emergency room, everyone in the trauma staff having to respond to all of these children with life-threatening life-threatening injuries and having to triage, who has the worst situation right now that we need to bring to the OR soonest? How can we manage this, mass kind of violence event and take good care of everyone appropriately? It's so impossible to be in those situations and then to be those physicians and, lose the life of a child in front of you. I cannot imagine. It's totally horrific.
It's totally horrific. That photograph of that mom running, holding her shoes will always stay with me.
Mhm.
Yeah, Dr. Stevens, I mean, I'm a firefighter and EMT and the other part of my job. And when you see what bullet wounds do to those little bodies, I don't know how anybody can see that and then and not vote for common sense gun violence safety.
Exactly. And not even just, the physical, having children die, having children with lifelong, maybe brain injuries or paralysis, they're going to be traumatized for the rest of their lives. And mental and emotional health are so important too. And when kids this young see their classmates dying or having injuries around them and having to then live in fear every single day of their lives, the mental health implications of this are huge.
Yeah. Yeah. Dr. Stevens, you're such a fierce advocate about this. You've testified before the legislature and you've written publicly about the ways that policy directly shape health outcomes. In your view, how should lawmakers and Minnesotans as a whole think about gun violence as a public health issue, not just a public safety issue?
Yeah, it is absolutely a public health issue. And this is one of those circumstances where we 100% need to think about the good of the many over the individual desires and opinions of the few. We always have gun advocates saying, well, I need my gun for hobbies, for hunting, or to protect my family, even though a lot of research suggests having a gun in your home is more likely to result in an accidental injury than actually protecting anyone. It's all about, well, I am a law-abiding gun owner, so why should I have to care about the people out there who are not being responsible? Because people are dying every single day. This is harming all of us every single day. And so those individual rights, unfortunately, are superseded by the fact that we want our children to live. We want our people to be safe in our communities. And so it's just like vaccines. We need to have as many people vaccinated as possible to protect everyone. We need to have as much common sense gun legislation in place as possible to protect everyone.
Completely, completely. In addition to the work that yourself and people like you have been doing, the families of Annunciation have been showing up again and again and again. 8 months later, they are still showing up, still demanding action from their elected officials. For yourself, as someone who has also had to fight to be heard in the halls of the Capitol, what would you say to those families?
Yeah, I know that sometimes it can feel hopeless, and like you are just talking into a void. But absolutely, there are those of us out here that are listening. Your stories matter, your voice is important. And tragically, these families are having to deal with the grief of losing their children, something that no parent should ever have to go through. And on top of that, they are stepping up and trying to make sure this doesn't happen to anyone else. That is huge. I respect that. I admire that. And as much as it can feel like it's just time to give up when people aren't passing the legislation that we need and aren't taking these protections seriously, there are good people out there. Always look for the helpers. Always know that there are people like those on this call that will always fight to make sure that this doesn't happen to another child or another family.
I love that. There are always helpers. There's always heroes. Well, one last question, if I might, Dr. Stevens.
Yeah.
What is one concrete, specific thing that you wish more Minnesotans understood about the medical consequences of gun violence? Something that might, I don't know, change how people act or think about what keeping kids safe really means.
Yeah, I mean, this is not a small problem. Guns are the number one cause of death for children in our country. Homicide and suicide are the leading cause of maternal mortality in our country, and two-thirds of those cases occur with firearms. So this is not just some non-issue that is happening rarely that we can kind of brush off. The numbers are huge. When we see those statistics, when we see numbers on the page, we have to remember that those are human lives. Those are families that are forever affected. And so, as easy as it can be to become numb to these stories and feel like, well, it probably won't happen to me, this is a huge, huge issue. And we need to take it seriously to make sure we prevent future deaths and future forever trauma.
Yeah. Thank you. That's very, very helpful. And thank you so much for joining us on the call today, Dr.
Of
Stevens. I really
course.
appreciate your work
Yeah.
and your time.
Yeah, absolutely. Thank you so much for having me.
Of course, of course. You're always welcome here in the DFL Daily. Everyone on the call, please make sure to follow Dr. Stevens on social media. I see that Tim already dropped a link into the chat for all the socials there. Thank you so much, Dr. Stevens. Uh,
Yeah.
wh- One of the things that Dr. Stevens said that really impacted me, that's sticking with me right now, is that guns are the leading cause of death for children. Someone dies every day. On the day that Republicans voted against Emma Greenman's bill, someone died from gun violence. On the day that Republicans voted against Brad Tabke's bill, someone died from gun violence. Today, while we're on this call, today while we're going about our days, somebody will die from gun violence. I encourage you to think of what the fact is that you heard, what tidbit you heard from this conversation. Put it in your back pocket for the next time you're having this conversation. I have family members that are gun owners, that are hunters, that fiercely advocate for their right for guns. And this is what I'm going to say to them the next time that I'm in the conversation. Gun violence is the leading cause of death for children. Someone dies every single day. So, once again, DFLers, here's the message for the week. Minnesotans are the heroes. People like Lydia Kaiser are the heroes. DFLers are the helpers. The families at Annunciation, they're the heroes. The students who are marching and testifying and demanding change, they are the heroes. The teachers who are locking their classroom doors and keeping kids calm, oh, they are the heroes. Our job as DFLers is to help achieve the prevention measures to celebrate those heroes and to honor them through common sense gun violence prevention. That's today's message. Minnesota families are leading the way on gun violence prevention, and DFLers are standing with them every single step of the way. This week, keep your communications focused just on that, the heroes in your community, the families, the students, the survivors who are demanding change. Today's call to action, find an event and show up in a real, meaningful way for local leaders that are fighting for gun violence prevention. Tim's going to put some links in the chat right now. A great way to find some more information is to follow these organizations on Instagram and find out what they have coming up. Organizations like Protect Minnesota, Minnesota Moms Demand Action, Giffords, Everytown for Gun Safety. All right, DFLers, we have 189 days left until the November 3rd election. Let's go win this thing for them. Have a good day.